6 o'clock. Would all please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance?
Flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I would like to thank everyone for attending tonight's meeting. Before we begin, I will remind everyone that our meetings are recorded to be accessed for future viewing by the public. Your conversations while at the meeting may be picked up via the microphones used to record the board discussions during the meeting. Please be cognizant of this throughout the meeting. Thank you. Do we have any presentations tonight? I know Charlie's going to give us a wonderful budget overview, so.
I'll start us off, so Mr. Cowan, ready? Floor is yours.
Okay. So two things with last meeting. One, I failed to have the audio. So there was a budget presentation that had been put out on our website to kind of summarize what was talked about regarding the budget at least. But even more so than that, I kind of looked at it and said, you know, a lot of these details, I don't even like listening to me, so I can imagine what the rest of you feel like. So I really want to try to stop doing that and talking about this is this line item, this is that line item, and really, rather than talk about the road trip, get more to the destination, because I know many of the board members reminded me of my kids, many of the people in the audience last week, it was, their last meeting was, are we there yet? You know, and it was an unfun ride, I would say, for most of us. So not that it's going to be more fun, but I'm hoping it's more informative to the people that are here. So a few things, you know, as we started the budget back in October, we said, we knew it was going to be a hard year. That's why we started in October. We typically start with something, the first or second meeting in January. In October, we presented a budget, very preliminary, obviously, no idea where state aid was going to be, no idea where certain expenditures were going to be. But that's the number up there in yellow across the top. And a few of the things that we wanted to include in the 24-25 budget, even at that point in time, are a few things that we knew were one, that we were going to lose a significant amount of federal assistance that was provided to the school district through the pandemic. Okay, so we knew that was going to happen. We were preparing for that since we started getting that money 3 years ago. We had talked about that. Two, we wanted to maintain some of the programs that were implemented with those funds through the pandemic, primarily some personnel, some programs for interventions for reading in the middle school, math intervention, and an elementary guidance counselor. So those were 2 points that we stressed right from the beginning. A third point that we had discussed was it's going to be very difficult to maintain those programs and only keep our tax levy at the tax levy limit. So at the January 16th board meeting, we talked about going out at 5.5%. And that is a number that the board is in agreement with. And the purpose of that primarily would be to preserve the programs that have been implemented as part of the pandemic. Three things. The fourth thing, the overarching thing with our budget at this point in time is also on January 16th, the governor said, here's what your proposed state, here's what I'm proposing your state aid will be Sequoia Valley Central School District. And she was unkind to Sequoia. She was unkind to more than half of the school districts in New York State. But what I was expecting back in October and even up until January 16th was a minimal or an increase to our foundation aid. She actually proposed a decrease of 1.25%. And with that, this was the last slide at the last board meeting. My $15.5 million that I had originally projected in foundation aid or in total state aid, I rolled back by $400,000. And that was where we ended last meeting at. With that $400,000 reduction, this is what it would look like. Just putting it in presentation format, basically. The only thing that had changed from our original budget on January 16th is that I took $400,000 out of our state aid and I added that to what the tax levy would need to be in order to fill that gap and still present the program that we would like. So that fourth piece, the reduction in state aid as opposed to a normal growth increase, is a curveball or an obstacle that was not expected up until the governor made her presentation or proposal on January 16th. So what does that mean to us today? We still would propose the 5.5%. We still would try to preserve the programs that were implemented during the pandemic. To do so, 5.5% would mean our levy this year is $8,600,000. 5.5% would raise another $473,000 or get us to $9,082,000. The tax levy on that prior page is $10,041,000. So we're talking $10,141,000. So we're talking about $1,050,000 gap at this point in time. Now, the 5.5% that was recommended was with some things understood and known. One, the board members had certainly talked about using some additional fund balance. Certainly, we've been able to build that up during the pandemic to a level, understanding that this day was going to come and that we would probably have to use for some fund balance. I certainly didn't want to propose that day one if we were able to get the foundation aid or the increases in state aid that I was hoping for. Where we're at today, I certainly would propose that. So what does the governor's proposal mean to us? What does a tax levy of 5.5% mean to two things? Mean one, to the programs of Sequoia Valley in 24-25, and two, what will it mean to the taxpayers in 24-25? Okay, so trying to stay kind of out of the fray a little bit here. The 5.5%, the items that are not highlighted take care of about $600,000 of that $1,059,000. Okay, and these are items that don't directly impact program. It is using some more fund balance, the first line. I'd say we'll use $250,000 more fund balance reserves. We've got reserves for employee retirement system, et cetera. Taking a look at where we have some cushion in our budget. You never want to give away your contingency that you have in your special education numbers, because those things go up, those numbers go up and down at the drop of a hat. But where we stand right now, we would be able to drop that by that $250,000 and another $50,000 in a private placement. Again, not impacting program directly, but cutting our budget much thinner than it's been and dipping into our fund balance to a greater extent than we have in past years. Okay. Had a meeting, I talked about it our last, I met with our financial advisors, just our final debt service number would allow us to save about $32,000 there. These three items I want to talk about mainly to make sure that the board is aware. What we would like to do is propose a capital outlay project again in 24-25. We did one in 22-23. We did one in 21-22, 22-23. We suspended it this year because we knew the debt service for the capital project was coming on. We'd like to resume that in 24-25. We've been able to build up some money in a debt service fund, money that we, mainly because of interest rates being favorable the last year and a half. So we would fund that with money from the debt service fund, would not impact the taxpayer. To do that, what we've done for the last 2 years is we've replaced some doors in the elementary school, middle school, excuse me, interior doors, where we've taken out doors that have bigger windows in the classroom doors and put in window doors that have smaller windows for security purposes. Can't see in them as easily, can't break in as easily, etc. So that's going to be, for the most part, wrapped up at the end of this year for the middle school. The $100,000 project would address those issues in the elementary school. I don't know if it'll handle all of them, but it'll take a bigger chunk out of it than doing $25,000 in a year. Okay. And then the last couple items, just looking at, what the governor's number was, gave us about 32,000 over that 400 I took away. And then we would cut our equipment down by $20,000 as well. So on the road trip, the $1,050,000, the $650,000 was the easy part. That was not impacting program. That was the ride across the Great Plains in this wintertime. Now we get to the $400,000 that still has to be resolved. Now we're hitting the Rocky Mountains in the wintertime, and that's where I can't tell you a place in the budget where I can find $100,000. I can find $15,000. I can find $20,000, and we can do that. But I can't find $400,000. So that's where we are at this point in time with what the governor's proposal does to our budget, and a 5.5% tax levy proposal with where we are at with our budget for 24-25. Questions on any of that? Okay. 5.5%, what does it do to the taxpayer?
I got a question.
Anytime we would put to question. Yes, sir.
So you're taking an additional $250 from the fund balance. How much were we taking previously
at the previous meeting?
827. Over $1 million we will be at.
Charlie, if I could just add, if we take $1 million from the fund balance, we'll be out of fund balance in the 3 years, is that correct?
That is accurate. Yeah, we were about $3.1 million. You know, and I certainly talk about this all the time. Our budget is not built where every dollar that's budgeted is spent, and anybody that's budgeted understands that, I believe. So we hope that when say we're going to use $800,000, built into that would have been some contingency in the special education, some money in health insurance, different places within the budget. So we say we're going to use 800. If all things go really bad, we may actually do that. But our hope is really that we use 100, 200 at the most. Next year, I would expect if we were to approve a budget like this, we're putting ourselves at a higher risk of using $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 of fund balance.
I'd just like to add too, when he talked about taking out some cushion from the fund balance, he's not talking about a 4 or 5 inch cushion you sit on your couch. He's talking about a yoga mat. We don't have a lot of cushion into this, so.
Yeah, 3 million sounds like a pretty good number. It's much better than it was as we were able to build some money through the pandemic. But we've shown graphs before. Take a look at us compared to other school districts. We're at the bottom of the line as far as total money that we have in the bank in comparison or relative to our budget. We're at, I think, around 10 or 11% now. 3.1 million on $25 million budget. We're at the very bottom at that 10, 11%. It goes up to as high as 39, 40%. So we talked about where we are today with our budget. Still $400,000 that needs to be resolved. An amount that the administration, and we have had a word from the old days that Jim Van Murray, a spirited conversation about how will we get to that number. And we are hopeful that one thing that will happen is that there will be additional aid from New York State. So we're not prepared to say $400,000 means this. But you can certainly understand if there is not more state aid or a significant amount of state aid to help reconcile that 400,000, that won't be resolved by saying, take another little bit out of supplies, take a little bit more out of your contraction. Okay. So that's where we are at, what the budget in the does to the programs at this point in time. When we talked about going at 5.5%, what does that mean to the taxpayers? So taking a look at what an average assessed value on a single family home is in each of the communities in Paris, it's up to about $140,000, the average home. There's about 1,500 individual homes that have taxpayers in them. Take the total assessment, divide by that 1,500, that's the 141,000. The additional amount that we would raise at that 5.5% increase of $473,000 is about $1.32 per thousand on 141. That's the $186. So and that would be the increase to the tax bill over each week. It's about $3.60. You can see a low of about $1.94 in Litchfield, a high of as much as $3.72 on the average home in the town of Marshall. So that's the impact to the taxpayer at 5.5%. All right. Questions on those items? All right. So I talked about the governors and too many numbers here. This is kind of aid 2 years ago, aid last year, aid this year, aid next year. And you can see one of the items, foundation aid, and that's the one, 9,000,001, 9,000,004, her proposal, 9,000,003. So her proposal of 9,000,003 looks like this compared to what's been happening the last 3 years. 2020, 21, this year was flat. That was when the pandemic was in high gear and we received some additional funding from the federal government, but really we were flat in foundation aid the year of the pandemic. Since then, 3%, 3%, 3.5%, governor's proposal minus 1.25%. Should we have received a 3% increase, which was my true expectation in October when we put this budget together, that number would be $9,716,000. The gap between 9,716 and the 9,314 is $401,000. Give us our money, Governor, and we don't have to worry about cutting any of our programs. I mean, I'm still going to be sleepless some nights because we're boosting up the amount of fund balance we're using. We're cutting our budget much tighter than we normally would do. But back in October, if everything came as I would hope it would, we got that 3% increase in foundation aid We'd still ask for 5.5% because we want to keep the programs that we implemented during the pandemic. We're not asking the state to take care of that for us. That's something that we believe, the administration believes should be done, and we would ask our taxpayers to fund that for us. But the rest of the operations and the $400,000 that we're going to have to deal with, we would expect the state to come through with what we would hope was a deal. Foundation Aid started in 2007, 2008. At the time that it was written, there was a formula, and if you ever were off formula, you would get a minimum increase of 2%. Things have changed. Things have certainly happened over the 25 years since 2007-8. And there were many years that it was flat. But generally speaking, if you can count on 2 to 3% increase, it's a struggle, but we could probably make things work. And that's where we're at today. Are there any questions, any comments by any of the board members? Anybody in the audience? Be happy to try to answer them.
I got a question. If you didn't have to take any fund balance, what would you have to do for a tax
Another
levy?
$1 million,
So
10, 11, 12,
5.5.
13%, probably more.
How much?
13%.
30.
Yeah.
So to gain 400 on the 5.5, what would that have?
Let's say 80,000 is a percent. Let's say it's 5. You know, it's a little, 86,000 is really a percent. So it's a little under that, but 3 3/3, I should say, somewhere in that range.
And last year we went out for 2.5.
We went out at the limit, which was, I think, 2.14, right around there. We've been 2 for the last number of years. Yes, or right around there.
I was saying the previous meeting, so we've been at 2 because that's where this new. What gap elimination adjustment, whatever the
The
tax
tax
cap came in years ago, but before that, we were always 5, 6, there was a year we were 12, and the budgets were passed, no problem back then. So 5.5 sounds like a lot because we've been at 2, but previously before the tax cap. Was a walk in the park. As you said, it's a cup of coffee. If you look at a cup of coffee a week that we're asking for. And again, this isn't Charlie Collins' budget. This isn't my budget. It's the board's budget. The board represents the community both sides. So what does the community want to support? That's really what the question is.
Charlie, were we at 1.9% 1 year? Did we do under 2?
We were, well, we might have been under 2. We were at 0.19% 1 year was the tax cap. The board did go out at 2% so that required us to exceed the tax cap as 5.5% would. We know exceeding the tax cap requires 60% approval from the community rather than a simple majority. So that's one of the risks. Certainly the board is cautious and aware of that and, continues to discuss that. If your budget's defeated, there's another opportunity for a budget, but 2 defeats means you go back to 8,608,000, not our 2.3%, which would our levy increase would be under the tax.
So last year, with this looming reduction of COVID money, if we want to call it that, I was a proponent of going higher than what we did, because we already knew the writing on the wall, and we didn't.
Correct.
And I would say, to some degree, we've been running scared for 4 or 5 or 6 years at 2, 2, 2, 2, 2, and it's caught up to us.
Yep.
And I'll just share with everyone here, whether you're a teacher or a taxpayer. So I have a house in Richfield Springs. And they went out last year at 8.64%, and it passed. And their contingency was 7.86 if it didn't pass. And this was sent to me in the mail to, homeowner XYZ resident, blah, blah, blah. And I guess my point is that we probably could have got more than 2 last year. That's water under the bridge.
Yeah.
But I think we got to go more than 5.5 this year is my opinion. And we need to maybe look at next year as a additional.
Yeah,
more.
Certainly discussion. It sounds like that
I'll
8
give it
point
to you.
something was
You can have it.
within the tax cap. I'm just guessing, you might be wrong.
Now, I don't like taxes, but.
Yeah.
There's got to be a give and take. And if you put it in the terms of what it means to somebody's house value, it's a lot easier to stomach than in a percentage form. Especially when it's out there that the tax cap is 2% or whatever it happens to be.
Yep.
And people see 8, or they go, oh my goodness, they're killing us.
So
When you put it in in the terms that you did with the house value, it's maybe a little more sellable, but
Right.
I think we obviously need to cut something, but we also may need to raise more than 5.5. Because we're gonna be in the same point we are this year, next year.
So their 8% was within the tax cap, and there are pieces that, allow that to
The
happen.
taxpayers, my point is they had to stomach 8%,
They did.
and they did. This is my point. Whether it's in the tax cap or not, they were willing to go that number. It's a smaller school district, I get that.
Mhm.
Okay, but it's also a poor school, there's much more farm than here.
Yep.
Okay, and they were willing to stomach that type of percentage.
Yep.
Do we know our region well enough to know they'll stomach that? I don't know.
Right.
But at some point, we've got to do better than what we're doing now.
Yeah. And I think that's a point certainly to be made, and we've shown that information that Mr. Staton stated, before the tax cap was in place, 5, 6, 7% was not unheard of, was the norm. This 2% for 13 years now is just leading us down that someday things are financially going to blow up on us, and they're probably there.
I mean, his question is when we run on a fund balance, 3 years. That's a pretty short window to rely on.
So we would like to bring you to the budget presentation and stand in front of the community and tell them we need an 8% raise. So when we go 5.5, we're gonna look good.
I sat here instead of there. Yeah, I mean, I may get someone thrown at me, but my point is there's more here than just cut. We can't spend, but we gotta look at reality. And if a community this size can agree to 8,
Mhm.
then maybe a community our size can agree to 6 or 7. I don't know.
Thank you.
Well, I'll just-
With the state, with the governor, I know she came out well, obviously. But she's got some pushback. So, right, exactly. So is there, when would we, I guess, maybe the final thing is we do get the 400. But how do we,
But we won't know until after we've already asked for the 5.5, at
Right,
which
we're not
point, if
gonna
we
know.
get the 400 and we still should go out at 5.5 regardless.
Right.
Because we know that we're facing the
No.
same uphill
I'm
battle.
not saying not go to 5.5, I'm not saying that, I'm just saying the chance, we may get that money in the long run, but we can't really take that chance, I guess.
Yeah, no, and even if we get the 400, that still is saying, give us 5.5%.
Nope. I
The 400
understand that. Yeah,
No.
yeah, I'm not saying not do the 5.5, still do the 5.5.
I think perhaps the statement that I made too early was the 5.5% will preserve the programs that were implemented during the pandemic. Not expecting $400,000 deduct from the state aid from the governor. A 5.5% might preserve some other programs that the board or the community or the administration feels are more important than those items, those programs that were implemented. But I'll tell you that those programs that were implemented are pretty high on the list of the administration.
And I'd just like to reiterate, even with that 400,000 put back, even with the 5.5%, we've already made staff reductions. It'll just mean a lot more, as you said. He's cut out 650,000 and slides and stuff, and that's about all we can do. So another 400,000, now we're talking staff, now we're talking programs, now we're talking extra curriculum. I don't want to get specific, but it's.
And we're taking 250 that we really shouldn't touch.
Yeah.
On top of that 400, taking an extra 250 we shouldn't really touch.
Yeah, we're taking 800, we shouldn't touch either, but.
Right, yeah.
Other questions or comments? Good for now.
All right, thank you, Mr. Collins.
Thank you.
Sure, yeah,
But we're gonna go right into the board meeting.
right into it. Okay.
So this time,
At this time, we're going to move into our regular board meeting. So item number 3. Do we have any additional presentations outside of Charlie's wonderful budget presentation?
Not tonight.
Nothing? So do we have any Board of Education subcommittee reports?
We do. Last Tuesday, our Facilities and Transportation Subcommittee met. And so we had Adam Crossman, our Transportation Director, and Scott Gillette, our Director of Facilities. So Mr. Crossman detailed some of the staffing concerns that we've had regarding bus drivers and monitors, although we do have 2 recent hires in the Transportation Department for bus drivers being trained, and that'll alleviate some of the issues that we've had. So we're feeling much better. We are, right, Mr. Reven, about our driving situation? I'll say yes. Okay, good. He also explained our status with the EV electric bus grant applications. As you know, the state wants everyone to move to zero emission buses. So we do have some grants out and are looking to potentially purchase an EV bus in the very near future.
Did that get pushed back?
There was something on the news last night regarding
Like
What's the
20,
timeline?
2035 or 2040, something, a very substantial push back.
Yeah, because the initial dates were purchases by 2027, full fleet by 2035. Now
Yeah.
they've even moved, I think, of that. In the facilities and transportation, Scott Gillette reviewed staffing, capital project updates were near complete on the initial capital project, and the IP phone update, internet protocol phones. The phones that we have on campus are antiquated, so we're looking to upgrade that. It's all OC's aidable, so we're looking to utilize OHM services to install those phones. And we also discussed some of the security measures taken in the elementary school main office, including push buttons for the blue lights and the event of a lockdown, and the exit door in the fitness center that leads into the gymnasium. It's just, again, it's just a security issue, but those have been addressed by our facilities department. So those were the main topics that we discussed at that subcommittee. And as far as any others, we have our policy subcommittee meeting, and that will be held March 5th, right before the next board meeting at 5:30. And that is it for our subcommittee.
Okay, superintendent's report.
Reminder that budget vote is May 21st from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. That's where we'll ask the community to come to vote on the budget. And also we have 3 seats for board members. There are 3 seats up. If anyone is interested in running for the board, we ask that you come to the district office to secure a petition, and that petition is due Monday, April 22nd by 5 p.m. to the board. Some other news I would like to discuss. So the elementary school is currently holding a food drive. We're able to pack the pantry, and today they've collected over 1,700 items. So their goal is to hit 2,000, right? 19,000 by it's Thursday or Friday. Friday.
Thursday.
Thursday. We hear Ms. Perger give us updates every morning. And so, yeah, students and staff responded, and that's outstanding, 1,700 items so far. That's impressive. I see Mr. Jones standing back there, so we'll turn to sports. We've got a lot to discuss as far as sports, a lot of accomplishments. The boys track team has recently won the CSE championship and the Section 3 title, that's indoor track. The girls track team was named CSE champions as well, and they placed 3rd in Section C out of 17 teams. So very excited with their accomplishments. And we have state qualifiers tomorrow night at OCC. And what is it, 13 students will be? 13 attempting to qualify for state. So very exciting things coming out of our indoor track and field teams. Boys basketball recently won the CSE league title, first time in over 20 years, and the first time since playing in Class B. We had student Donovan Nelson, who recently scored his 1,000th point, first boys basketball player that's quite ever to do that. And the boys basketball sectional playoffs will begin in a few days. On the girls basketball team, Elena Weaver recently scored her 1,000th career point, and she also broke the school record for 3-pointers in one season. So, a lot of accomplishments on the basketball court. Turning to the volleyball court, girls volleyball team recently lost a hard-fought sectional playoff game, won 5 sets. It was a good game. And boys are still in the regular season. Last night they actually took their first defeat. They've been undefeated for a very long time. Again, another good game last night. But the boys volleyball team is well positioned for sectionals, which are upcoming. And on another note, coming in April and May, at the suggestion, recommendation of our Vice President Lynn Weibel, we're bringing back cooking classes that we used to offer years ago. So our family and consumer science teacher, Melanie Brangelo, will be offering a couple of classes, and she's calling it Spice Up Your Spring. We're looking to hold one class in, I think, one in March, one in April. One is called Pan to Plate, and one is called Meatless Monday. And more details will be coming in that. These are just some upcoming events I want to.
Are we utilizing them as fundraisers?
Well, we're charging. Not really. I mean, we're charging a small fee, but that is really to cover the cost of the product. So any extra funds will go right into the balance for family super centers. But it's more about getting the community involved in the school.
I feel like we could do both. I feel like we could add a little bit more to make it a fundraiser. That was the idea behind it, was how to get the community involved, but also help out the meeting.
We haven't confirmed all the details. We'll take a look at that pricing. But again, that is just one more event we are featuring. And then last, as I stated earlier, May 14th is the budget hearing. We'll invite the community to the auditorium to discuss our positioning a week before the budget vote. And that is all I have for the report.
Any old business that anyone would like to discuss? Okay, move on to new business. I will read 7.1 through 7.16. 7.16. There's one items. Okay. 7.1, approval of retirement. 7.2, approval of resignation. 7.3, approval of retirement. 7.4, appointment of substitute bus monitor. 7.5, approval of bus driver. 7.6, approval of building maintenance mechanic. 7.7, additional athletic spring teams. 7.8, revised reviewed policies. As reviewed by the last policy subcommittee meeting. 7.9, approval of budget modification. 7.10, approval of minutes of the January 30th, 2024 meeting. 7.11, treasurer's report of balances. 7.12, resolution authorizing payment of bills approved by the claims auditor. 7.13, committee on special education and committee on preschool special education recommendations. 7.14, approval of charge order GC-005. 7.15, approval of change order GC-006. 7.16, approval of change order EC-002. Anyone have any items that they would like to pull for further discussion?
I don't want to pull any items. I'd just like to mention very quickly for 7.3 on the approval of the retirement of Nancy Zampano as a math teacher. So if you're not aware, she retired from the Kentucky School District a few years ago and then came on board at our high school for a few years. And she's just been such a great asset to the school. She's always in positive frame of mind. And you know, what else I love about her is I see her at so many sporting events. I mean, this is a retired teacher. This is her second job. She's only here for a few years and she still goes to a lot of sporting events to support the students. And that's just what you love to see in an educator. So she will be dearly missed.
Nobody has anything else that they'd like to pull? Looking for a motion to approve the items 7.1 through 7.16. Patty is first. Mike the second. Moving on to item number 8, miscellaneous topics. Anyone have anything for miscellaneous topics? Yeah, we have.
So I talked about the potential for a capital outlay project. If we That is included in the budget. The budget's defeated, that would not be able to happen, but just wanted to make the board aware that that is something that we intend to pursue at this point in time. The other thing is the major project, the $10,785,000. Phase 2 was last summer. The big piece of that was the replacement of the turf field and some mechanical work, et cetera. There's still about $500,000 left for that. And there's some proposed additional mechanical upgrades in this building that $500,000 would be used for. So we got the architects and the engineers starting to put that scope together, just so it's not a surprise to the board that there will be a phase 3. We require new bids at some point, probably not for a year because SED takes half a year to approve things, but that's what's going on. Thank you.
Mr. Butler?
Yes, I just want to speak on Linda Moore's retirement in the elementary school. She's been a wonderful teacher aide since my time in Sequoia, always very positive, easygoing, flexible. She's served many different roles as a TA. She's currently been a one-to-one for students and helping them academically and just being successful in school until they can be independent on their own. But she is someone that's always punctual. Her attendance has been great. She's been a team player along the way, and I'm surely, I know myself, but then on behalf of the entire district, certainly going to miss Linda, even though I kept teasing her that we really don't, we're going to take this away, but she's definitely retired. But she's been absolutely wonderful to work with. So I'll be happy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I have one miscellaneous topic that I would like to bring up, and I know, Dave, I think we've talked about this at great lengths. We're still looking for volunteers for multiple organizations right across the district. Sports Boosters is in need of volunteers. I know PTO is always looking for an extra set of hands. Much like those of us sitting at these tables tonight, everyone needs volunteers. Every organization needs volunteers, and I would really like to see fundraising drummed up like to the nth degree for every one of the organizations. I see fundraising flyers all the time for whatever restaurant, whatever it may be, right? Like, I'd like to see Sequoia Valley listed as the recipient of fundraisers. Volunteer, and let's start doing some fundraising to help for some of the issues that we face. That's all I have.
Thank you.
Public to be heard. Before we open up public to be heard, there is a statement I need to read. Dear members of the community, thank you for attending tonight's meeting. Prior to opening the floor to the public, we ask that you please keep in mind the following. Public to be heard is intended solely as an opportunity for the community to voice their opinions and/or concerns. Comments should be related to the district and/or tonight's agenda. Matters involving specific individuals should be addressed in a private setting with appropriate school personnel. The DOE policy prohibits parties from participating in immediate dialogue. Therefore, we are not able to answer questions or enter into an active conversation. The Board of Education will review all materials presented and respond if needed in a timely manner. Public comments will be limited to 5 minutes. We genuinely value and appreciate all input and support from this community. Thank you for your understanding. With that being said, is there any members of the community that would like to speak or have anything that they would like to address tonight? I apologize for you having to listen to me speak extra long. With that, I believe we do have executive session tonight. So we will move into that segment of the meeting.
All right, before we move there, let me just do a drawing very quickly and then we'll take a motion to
I didn't get a red little ticket.
Marina Littell.
They still
It says Lindsay Kidder.
So I did a hundred.
She's Missouri.
Oh. That's four digits or 5666.
Oh, that's mine.
Oh, really?
John's like, I am not.
That was one off.
Something shady around here. Questionable.
Don't make us go to video footage. Thank you very much, Mr. Bitter.
No, I wouldn't let
Here we go.
That's why I go to. Not every day, by the way.
I need a motion.
A motion to move into executive session. Ron first, you guys second, thank you.